Benjamin Solak, Stephen Ruiz, two guys I potted with for a long time at The Ringer. Stephen's still one of the greats in the industry at The Ringer. Benjamin is now my colleague here at ESPN. He wrote a column yesterday on, I read it. There's a couple of things I just quickly want to, last couple weeks, you did not sell your Anthony Richardson stock. Do you feel great about that right now?
Yeah, it's nice when an easy one comes over the plate, right? 85 miles per hour, middle, four-seam fastball that didn't move, and this is one of them. The really big, really fast guy who didn't play a lot of football was kind of up and down in his 10th start. That's how it goes in the NFL sometimes. And so when he gets benched and there's kind of like a crazy moment there with the Colts, the playoffs, Joe Flacco, and it doesn't seem like there's any sort of long-term view. You're like, all right, this is a mistake. And then 2 weeks later he beats the Jets.
But that's not the reason it was such an easy call. The reason was Joe Flacco was the backup. And that's the thing that was driving me mad, is that not that they were benching Anthony Richardson, who wasn't playing the best football. It's that they benched him for Joe Flacco, who hasn't been good at football in 10 years?
It was overrated last year.
Yeah. That was the best part is the whole Flacco's going to win. It's all right, well, the Browns last year had the best defense in football. Has anybody watched the Colts defense?
And Joe was not careful with the ball. There was a narrative that he was not going to make mistakes. He was going to keep everything in front of him. You guys should watch Joe Flacco if that's your take. I mean, there's other guys who don't make mistakes, just hit checkdowns, whatever. Flacco is not that guy.
I will say it was more fun than if it were Davis Mills, because I got to chill on my couch in 2024 and be like, that's Joe Flacco. That's crazy. I'm still watching him. How fun.
I started a newsletter the other day. And the reason I did it, and people were like, "Oh, great!" When you do that, you get all these people who are new age, social media people, be like, great play by you. And I'm just like, what? And they're like, you want to build an empire. I'm like, no. It's because there's 11 social media platforms. I just want to reach people directly. So I haven't written a story since I profiled Mike Vrabel in August of last year for The Ringer, right before I joined Omaha and ESPN. And I wrote a paragraph, and then I gave up.
Yep.
So that's where I'm at.
That sounds like me trying to write yesterday. That's about the speed I was operating at.
Except
it's week 12, man.
In that, I just work for myself. And now I'm just like, no one's asking me to do this.
I've written one paragraph in the last 4 years, actually. Just pretending to be a writer.
It's about Brock Purdy. All right, so we're not actually doing how many paragraphs you've written over the past 2 years. We're doing the 2025 head coach hot list. And this is starting to percolate. Tom Pelissero had a column. I love Tom Pelissero. I love him. I love him as a person. I love him as a reporter. He listed about 95 head coaching candidates. And that's not an exaggeration. If you saw the list, it was 20 guys had paragraphs. And then, which is, by the way, 19 more paragraphs than I've written in the past 2 years. And then he had future. And it was 80 guys. It was basically if you weren't on there, you should be incredibly offended.
I'm pretty sure Ben Solak was on that list too.
Ben Solak was number one.
The passing game coordinator for Syracuse was on there.
The thing is, dude, Miami has Syracuse in 2 weeks now. I haven't slept. I haven't slept in weeks thinking about it. Teddy Clark will be in the dome, just so you know. So the one thing I thought was funny on that list was that Clint Kubiak was in a future. And it's man, what tough timing to not get a paragraph. Would he have gotten a paragraph a month ago?
Oh, for sure. For sure he would have made
after
it.
week two? After week two, he would have been
at the
top of the
number
list.
one.
Yeah. How are we going to keep this guy?
How are we now he's in Tom Pelissero's also rants with there were a couple really funny ones. But yeah, no, it's Ken Dorsey was in there. Ken Dorsey was in the also rants.
I still believe.
Ken Dorsey.
I still believe.
Yeah.
You still believe?
Yeah. The Bills' offensive stats this year are identical to last year's stats. Nobody has noticed. The vibes are better because the record is better, but everything is the same.
Wins are not a team stat, Kevin. We've been over this.
Yes, they are. And I now firmly, I think wins are the number one quarterback stat. I've just come completely around on this, and now I only value wins. Sorry, guys.
All stats are quarterback wins. I've come to accept that. Yeah, where it's fundamentally everything, any discourse that someone tries to do that's smart is just a couple of degrees removed from quarterback wins, and they're trying to hide it. Because that's the only discourse he doesn't get you yelled at is quarterback wins.
But it's also broadly correct. Quarterbacks have the most by far impact on winning, and you maximize your chances at winning by having a great quarterback. And then beyond there, a couple of tiebreakers within like the little tiny edges, the thousands of things that cost teams wins and losses. 95% of them can be deodorized over with a quarterback who knows how to win.
Sorry. See, I feel like we all accepted the fact that quarterbacks like own so much of a team's performance based on like the nerds told us, the analytics nerds, and we all accepted it. And we never questioned it. We never revisited that topic. But I feel like this season has flown in the face of that. I think it's presented evidence contrary to that right. belief.
I'm waiting for
look at Joe Burrow.
It's exactly what I was about to bring up. I'm waiting for any moment of Joe Burrow. But when it's Joe Burrow, right? He's Mr. Win, he's Mr. Joe Cool, he's Mr. Clutch. Then we do defense discourse, and then we do injury discourse, right? Whereas for the last like 4 years, we've been for some reason incapable of doing this when it was like Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, Justin Herbert in the regular season, right? Like it's we are very selective in the national discourse about which quarterbacks get grace in the QB wins. Our truth conversation, which ones don't.
Do you think your opinion is shaded by the fact you never won anything in your life?
Okay, so firstly, Pennsylvania's state champion 2014 Rocks and Minerals Science Olympiad. So why don't you watch your mouth, brother? Secondly, yeah, probably.
All right, let's do the hot list. Steven Ruiz, number one.
Number one on my list is Mike Vrabel. Like I think
there we go.
I think this is the season where tough guy football is back, where Dan Campbell is leading the
unbelievable. Just Solak stacking L's right now. Tough guy football is back. Quarterback wins are back.
Firstly, you don't even know if Vrabel's on my list or not.
Solak's a tough guy.
He's off your list because Ruiz just took it.
That's true.
Solak's tough. He won that whatever dumb championship he just named. No, but I really think Mike Vrabel was a guy who was ahead of the curve with this. He saw where defenses were going. He saw where defenses were going because he was one of the coaches, or he was leading one of the staffs that was doing the stuff on defense. Like the Titans' defense was really sharp, really ahead of the curve. But I think he realized what type of offense you need to build in order to combat that stuff. And we're seeing that this year. We're seeing that with Detroit, not so much with the 49ers this year, but definitely last year. But teams that are able to run the football when defenses know they're going to run the football have had a lot of success this year. And I think that's the team that not only does he want to build that team, I think he has the vision and the temperament to build it and to build that type of locker room environment. So I want to see him back in the league.
Yeah, I completely agree. As I said, that was the last thing I wrote for The Ringer was how amazing Mike Vrabel was. And I think there's a tendency to think, okay, former linebacker, blunt guy, like he's just a culture vibes guy. And it's actually very similar to Dan Campbell. We're like, no, there are so many layers of him. And he understands that passing efficiency is by far the number one thing that wins games. It's just that at the end there, he had crappy quarterback play. And that he's a defensive coach and you're going to rely on your offensive coordinator in some spurts and all that stuff. So I think he understands the game in a total in a 360 sense. And I don't think there's a lot of guys who are like that. And he also understands how to motivate players. He also understands how to connect with players and get them like toughened up. He jumps into drills. Like I love the guy. And I think he's, if they don't win the national championship, he might have Ohio State on his plate too, which is maybe something he wants to do just because he loves that university so much. So I think there should be a bidding war. And I think that, and I said this with Chris Sims 2 weeks ago, the Jets are the kind of place that should just turn over everything to Mike Vrabel and just be like, we don't know what the hell is going on. We want to be on the same page. You toughen us up.
How long would it take for Mike Vrabel to fist fight Aaron Rodgers if Rodgers stuck around?
Oh, I think Rodgers would be gone.
Of course he would. Yes. He would definitely be gone. But let's just imagine that those two work together. How long would it take? Wasn't
there a line I think it was on Raw Room, the great Darren Bates, Jalen Collins podcast, where they were like, Mike Vrabel will fight you. He will challenge you to a fight, and then he will coach you like as soon as the fight is over. But he will challenge you to a fight. So yes, I think there would be a brawl. I don't think Aaron would do it. I don't think Aaron would back off.
I would like to have seen Mike Vrabel handle the Hassan Reddick contract holdout. I think on one Tuesday in week 4, there would have been a knock on Hassan Reddick's door, and Mike Vrabel would have just been there and have picked him up by his chest, like picked him up by the shirt and just carried him into the facility.
Isn't there a rumor he did that to Urban Meyer when he was working at Ohio State? There's a rumor. I can neither confirm or deny this, but I've heard it.
A couple rumors about people. Like I actually think there's a lot of like Maureen Todd stories about people just just getting really mad at Urban Meyer, and it's probably not true. People like with everything. I've heard that story about others, like some famous stories in South Florida about that. Like I just think he's just if you want to fire up your fan base, you just say one of your coaches fought Urban Meyer. Like I don't think any of it's true.
I'm reading Tom Herman wanted to fight Mike Vrabel, and Tom Herman said, hold me back. And Mike responded, no, if he wants to fight, don't hold him back. This from the Joshua Perry and Evan Spencer podcast. Glory it is.
Joshua Perry used to play for Ohio State, so I would believe that. I had a really interesting Tom Herman thing. I'm gonna tell the story in 30 seconds. So this guy comes up to me at the Final Four and is like he said he's got a burner account that he talks to me on. Okay, or he's a reply guy. He literally came up to me and said, I'm a reply guy to you. Okay, great. So we're talking a little bit. His wife is there. His wife went to Texas, and Tom Herman walks past, and the woman's wife was like, the guy's wife was like, hey, I'm a huge Longhorns fan. Can take a photo. And he was like, yes, but I'm not going to do the hook 'em horns because I'm the coach at FAU. Remember, FAU was in the Final Four. So he's, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do whatever the hoot is. So he does some owl thing. And then as he's leaving, he was a great guy, very nice. He actually talked to us for a few minutes. Again, I don't know any of these people. One of these guys is my reply guy. But as he's leaving, he just grabs the woman, and not in a creepy way, but like almost like end of Lost in Translation, and just whispers in her ear, hook 'em horns. And then just left.
No, it's like what is it, Winter Soldier, where the guy's like Hail Hydra or whatever.
Yeah.
Similar to that. You got to update your record.
It was really endearing. It was actually really endearing. Anyway,
is he on your list?
Reply guy. You just got fired. You got fired.
I really thought when you said I have an interesting Tom Herman thing, it was going to be on your list, and I was like, I'm not prepared for this at all.
It's very available.
I've never told that story, and I just felt like now was the time to tell that story. I don't know why. When else is Tom Herman going to come up on the spot? All right, who's on your number one on your list, Ben Solak?
If there is a Mike Vrabel in waiting, I would argue that it is Aaron Glenn, the current defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. Glenn's been there since Dan Campbell took over. Previously, he was the defensive backs coach with the Saints. Obviously, he's a longtime Jets defensive back. He's a defensive-minded guy. His coaching tree, the root of it all is Bill Parcells, right? He's like, we have big players.
As is Dan Campbell, by the way.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like we have big dudes and we play man coverage and we stop the run, right? It's like the face value of it is very like old style, traditional style of football. But I don't think he's not sharp, right? And you've seen in previous seasons when they've had really bad defensive back play, he's wanted to be a man coverage team. They haven't really had the horses to do that, and they've tried to do creative stuff to solve that problem. They've got a really good safety duo. They got like a bunch of different linebackers. They rotate these guys and try to be creative. And now in the absence of Aiden Hutchinson this season, you've really seen them get creative defensively, right? They're first in EPA per dropback on defense. The best team in football. Now, a lot of that is the turnovers that they're creating, but they are like really, really good at getting blitzers from weird spots and sending and getting free rushers, not just on third down, but on early downs. Now they can trust their corners more. You've seen him coach his players and be a different guy over the course of different years. And then there was the survey that came out last year from the NFLPA, number one most positively reviewed coordinator on either side of the ball. And you get that sense in Detroit, right? When you're there, like those guys would die for Aaron Glenn tomorrow. They love him so much. He has such a great intensity. He's clearly a great culture guy. And I think the time in New Orleans where Sean Payton was, and then in Detroit with Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, would lead me to believe that, he's a defensive-minded guy, but he can probably sniff out a good offensive coach. Like, he's seen how those guys work for like a whole decade, and he's been coaching defense in the league for a long time. So I would trust his ability to put a good staff together. He'd be top of my short list if I were going to interview a guy.
Okay, so I completely agree. I spent time with Aaron Glenn for the first Dan Campbell story I did. And essentially, first of all, the growth of the defense, as you mentioned, has been pretty linear. Like it's exactly what you want to see, right? Like, it was really bad. It got incrementally better. He learned from his mistakes, all that stuff. But I think the authenticity, and that's something he learned from Dan Campbell, with it, which all of them learned from Bill Parcells. There's an authenticity there where they know players can smell a fraud, and so they're honest and they're direct. They coach them hard. They coach them honestly. Like, the Parcells tree, to me, I think is the most. It's hit and miss because some guys take the wrong lessons from Parcells. But I think there's a bluntness and an honesty there that makes everything better year over year. That's why Dan Campbell was able to turn around the Lions so quickly, is he had this blunt honesty that learned from Parcells. I do quickly want to hijack this by saying that I just watched an NFL film thing on Parcells that can't get out of my head, and I haven't talked about it here, which is he does a riff on how players have to play through injury. And it's like from like 1993, and he's staring at the camera. And I have no idea why he said this, like Steve Sabol. And he goes, nobody likes it. You can't talk about it. The liberals don't like it. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, did Bill Clinton and Al Gore like, no, we have to put guys on IR early. We have to put guys on IR the moment they're hurt.
Could you imagine Coach saying that today? Like, I feel like it's way harder to get away with that today than it would be.
I have the clip. I'm going to put it on Twitter.
By the way, I'm anti Bill Parcells now. I'm becoming. When I was younger, I was totally pro Bill Parcells. Yeah. Just a couple of his theories on things, like you are what your record is. That flies in the face of Ben and I's take on
sure,
but then players need to play through injury. The liberals don't want to hear this. Also,
his rules for quarterbacking, the 5 things,
but that's all changed because you can't. It's like 40 starts, right?
Yeah, it's like 40 starts.
Tell you what's 40
completion
starts.
percentage.
Cameron Ward.
Bo Nix would have been 1-1 on Parcells.
Dude, Bo Nix is good.
Yeah,
take that.
Let's
take
chill
that
out a little bit.
Take it.
I thought you said you read Ben's article.
Yeah, I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to agree any with it. Also, there's a paywall. You can't. I'm kidding. I'm a proud ESPN Plus subscriber. Although I don't do it for free. I don't get any of this. My wife is still mad at me for not getting free Spotify for the 3 years I worked there.
Yeah,
there's an HR portal, and I don't want to sign into it.
It's too much.
I don't know my passwords. I don't know anything. I got a thing the other day that I have not the other week, I have a past Disney parks that get me in all the time. And somebody was like, well, you get one for your spouses and your child and stuff, but you have to log in. And I was like, well, then then it's just going to be me. It's just going to be me. I don't know my passwords. I have a guy, Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of parameters here. Number one, as we know, this is not new territory. Bill Belichick, the GM, is the reason Bill Belichick, the coach at the end, was so poor. And what I'd like to see, and unfortunately the ship has sailed in Philadelphia, I would have loved to see him with Howie Roseman. I would have loved to see him with those stacked lines, both offensive and defenses, those defensive backs. Lord have mercy, would he love those defensive backs. Nick Sirianni's winning too much. And even I've been a huge Sirianni critic. Even I can't say you should fire a coach who's going to win like 13 games this year, 12 games this year. I understand that, and listen, if they lose in the playoffs, they go one and done. Howie and Jeffrey will hold him accountable. Like, they were pissed at him, I think, after the Super Bowl. And I think the tax you pay on having a roster that good is you're always under scrutiny. And my line is always, the Eagles have fired far better coaches than Nick Sirianni. And people were like, oh, well, they took him to the Super Bowl. Guess what Andy Reid did? He built a monster there. And then they, after 2 years, were like, all right, after 2 bad years, we're like, all right, let's go do something else. Mm-hmm. And so that's a tax you pay. Anyway, that's more about Belichick. I would love to see Bill Belichick in Dallas. Now, Parcells was there. There's a model there. Jones and Belichick have a good relationship. The roster building has never been the problem. The tiny little edges that you have, you as I mentioned earlier, that you need to win a football game, the Cowboys have one, which is they have good players. They have none of the other edges. And I think Belichick coming in, just coaching the 53, giving them those situational football edges that they never have. Like you saw, the Mike McCarthy play calls late in playoff games. The situational football is zero. Bring in the best situational football coach of all time. Good things will happen.
I do think they have good players. I don't think they have as many good players as they did, say, 2 years ago. And I think the roster is on the decline. And it's almost like, hey, Belichick, do you want to coach the 2019 Patriots again and see what happens from there?
I don't think it. Well,
he does have a quarterback, which is the big difference. I think Dak Prescott is a way better quarterback than what Mac Jones ended up being. That's not a strong take. But Dak has had problems staying healthy. I think there has been some slippage in his game this year with his accuracy. I think there are concerns going forward. I don't know if that's the team I would want to see him with. I would want to see him in Jacksonville, where I think they have young defensive pieces that he can work with and mold and turn into a good defense that, in a way, Ryan Nielsen hasn't been able to do it. And I would just want to see him get a hold of Trevor Lawrence and kind of give him the same lessons that he gave Tom Brady early on in his career when he turned into a elite quarterback.
So there's part of that is everyone's like, oh, he's not a quarterback. Yes, he is. He sat with Tom Brady and taught him how to read defenses, and that's part of the Tom Brady story. Here's what I want to push back on Jacksonville. They're going to turn the keys over to him and say, you run this organization. And then it's going to be Josh McDaniels, and it's going to be he's going to get the gang back together, and it's going to be New England again. And I think at this point, you don't have one of the great things about Bill Belichick, guys, is that Bill Belichick ran that team in New England like he was going to be the coach for 100 years, and understanding, hey, if we do this now, in the 3 years from now, we have to rob Peter to pay Paul. Like, he was so good at understanding the big picture. I don't think there's a big picture right now. Like, I think that he's at a point in his career where he can't run the team for 15 years. And so I wouldn't give him the keys. I would give him a 53-man roster and say, vámonos.
The big picture is already in place, though. It's Trevor Lawrence. Like, I think Belichick... I think Belichick, the GM's problems are overblown. Like, his problems were with drafting receivers and drafting and finding a quarterback, a replacement for Tom Brady. Like, on the defensive side, he was still drafting stuff. Like, his last draft was pretty good, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They have a receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. they can build around. Trent Baalke has spent a lot of money and poured a lot of resources into that receiving room. It's not good, but it's better than what the Patriots had. And then Trevor Lawrence is better than anything the Patriots have had at quarterback. And that pains me to say as a Cam Newton guy.
All right, number 2, Steven Ruiz.
This is more of a wish list type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think this is realistic at all, but I have Dan Lanning, the Oregon head coach, as my number 2. I see Dan Lanning as sort of the millennial version of Jim Harbaugh, where it's kind of like there's this juice that other coaches, I think, try to match and they fake it. But I really think this guy is insane about football and loves football. And not only that, but loves teaching football. Like, when you watch him run clinics, for instance, and maybe this is like the film nerd side of me.
Yeah, no, I've seen his clinics.
Yeah, his clinics, a lot of juice in those clinics. And then when you hear him talk, there's a lot of substance to that. And it's clear that he understands the game. And I think he's been very open-minded. Like, you look at his hires, he's hiring people from football Twitter, like people that me and Ben have been listening to for years.
Army, I think, did Will Stein call it an army of nerds, I think?
That's a good way to put it. It's an army of football nerds. And not like football nerds like, oh, success rate in EPA, like football nerds who understand.
Not Ben Solak.
No, not Ben Solak. We're talking about X's and O's. Ben doesn't know anything about football or ball or anything like that unless there's a number attached to it, of course. But no, I think he has the juice in the locker room, and I think it's not that, oh, I'm a dictator, I'm a college coach who controls your life and controls your scholarship. I think he's been a head coach in the NIL era, which I think prepares college coaches now better for the NFL than it did in the past.
Yeah. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this before I have a rebuttal?
I am generally extremely suspicious of college coaches that make the jump to the NFL level. I wrote a couple years ago, I think it was in the end of the rule era, keep pounding, go Panthers, thank you, Steven, about how we just shouldn't hire college coaches anymore. I would say that in my read of the room, Dan Lanning smells like the exception that proves the rule, where it's just like, all right, like, I wouldn't want to be the one to take this leap, but like, I'm pretty sure if you put me in a room with Dan Lanning for an 8-hour NFL head coach interview, I'd walk out being like, I don't know, I think that guy could do it.
Okay, outside of rule, let me just make one point. Yeah. Outside of rule, the college coaches that have been hired have been kind of hailed as geniuses, like guys that are going to bring their scheme. I don't like Dan Lanning does have the Georgia scheme thing going on, but I don't think that's what makes him so good. It's his ability to lead that locker room. Like, you look at all of the behind the scenes clips, like the speech in the locker room before the Colorado game, him getting the team ready for the jump around thing against Wisconsin. He thinks of this stuff beforehand, and I think that attention to detail will make him a good coach if he decides.
The thing that I'd be concerned about is that you're hiring the Oregon social media coordinator more than you're hiring the head coach Dan Lanning. Like, I would wonder the degree to which if there was a really good social media guy, I'm going to say something that I know is not true, but if there was a really good social media guy in Clemson, what we would think of Daboll Sweeney in terms of how he gets his team ready for Virginia Tech and Enter Sandman. You know, I think something's
funny you say that, because Dabo's introductory TikTok is still the most annoying thing I've ever seen in my life. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I think I do.
It's really bad. He's got like receiver gloves on, and
the drip or something.
Hickory dickory dock.
So you're
when he got that drip.
So your take, Ben, is that if you put Jason Garrett in place of Dan Lanning and had the Oregon social media person record it, you get the same juice out of it?
Not obviously you wouldn't. What I'm saying is that I think that there is a selection bias nature to the fact, like, we're getting a lot of Dan Lanning visibility because Oregon is really intentionally doing that. And I think some of that is because he's the man, and I think some of that is because that's how Oregon runs their program. And I worry about
it's not just Oregon. It's not just Oregon. I completely agree with you. The we're not playing for clicks thing made Dan Lanning get on the national radar. For me, this actually just happened with Miami, where so they do a cinematic recap, and before the Florida State game, a very, very good linebackers coach, I believe his co-DC as well, named Derek Nicholson, gave a pregame speech. And the whole thing was like, you've been waiting your entire life to play in this game. And like, it was a phenomenal speech. I got goosebumps for it. I clipped it, put it on Twitter. The amount of people who were like, future DC. And it's like, wait, maybe, but like, it's also because the Miami put this great speech out there. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the modern college football ecosystem, as Ben says, like, so much of it relies on the packaging of it. And I think Derek Nicholson's an awesome coach. But if I hadn't seen that, and you know, then I wouldn't. Am I supposed to think he's a worse coach? Like, the proof is in the results. And for me, Steven, more to the point, I didn't have this person on my list. They were like number 5, but I'm moving up number 2 just to argue with you. If I'm hiring Dan Lanning, why don't I call Kirby Smart first? Kirby, because what? Dan Lanning has more NIL deep pockets than Kirby Smart does. They're paying. My feeling on it, and I don't know anything about. I don't have the numbers. I know generally what each team spends just from sourcing, but Oregon buys players at the top of the transfer market, which is really, really, really expensive. Ole Miss does it too. You'll see it. Like, just look at like when guys who were 5 stars who transfer, like Evan Stewart would be a good example from Texas A&M. I don't know. I think he may have been a high 4-star, but like Evan Stewart is probably the guy who I'm guessing here commanded the most money of any receiver switching teams in the transfer portal, right? And when you're getting, like, you can't necessarily replicate that in the NFL. So I'll just say that he has a very talented roster. The second thing I'll say is that you run into the same situation with Rule, where it's like, it's really hard to replicate your roster building from college to pros. What Rule did was he was able to scout like track athletes, Uber athletes in Texas high schools or Northeast high schools at Temple. And then you take 20 of those guys and 4 of them end up being NFL studs, right? You can't really do that in the draft. You can't really do that with roster limits. So it was hard for him to do his kind of scouting, athleticism testing, all that stuff. But to the broader point, like, Kirby Smart has built better defenses than Dan Lanning. He's done it. He spent more time with Nick Saban. By virtue of that, he has more lessons from the Bill Belichick Parcells tree. He's talked about it before in the past in some of Kirby's clinics. He understands how to play modern defense, and he understands how to take athleticism and unlock it. We've seen it at every single level of Georgia football. He won a national championship with Stetson frickin' Bennett twice because he was able to figure out hire Todd Monken, get Brock Bowers in space, get George Pickens in space, do all that stuff. I just don't know why I wouldn't call Kirby before Dan Lanning.
Because I think Kirby is a part of that last generation of college coaches. Obviously, his success is translated to the NIL era, but I think it takes a different type of coach to connect with locker rooms today. Now I sound like an old man. Like I sound like Bill Parcells. Like the liberals. The liberals they don't like Dan Lanning.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But no, I just don't think Kirby Smart's stick would work in the NFL. I think he's too much of a disciplinarian. I think he's, well, maybe that's the bad word to use for Georgia. But no, I think he likes to yell at his players from the outside looking in. I don't know, but I don't think it would work as well with him. And I think Dan Lanning has shown an ability to at least know how to build the roster.
I leave the Ringer 14 months ago, and all of a sudden Stephen Ruiz has become a don't yell at players guy. Unbelievable. Solak, who's your number 2?
I'll do Anthony Weaver. I'll go back to the college, the NFL coordinator ranks. Anthony Weaver is the current defensive coordinator in Miami. I think the Lanning conversation is a good point of like, there's a list of guys we would interview, right? You never really know who's good, so you got to get them in the room. Weaver is an example of, all right, like, he's been a defensive coordinator for exactly 1 year, right? It's this current year in Miami, and it's been great. Like, I don't think they have nearly the horses on that defense that people like think they do or expect them to do, right? Like, Jalen Phillips got hurt this year. I thought that was going to like absolutely just evaporate the pass rush. Hasn't been the case. Like, when they signed Calais Campbell, I was like, this is a joke. What are we doing? They're getting good play out of Calais Campbell at this age. Like, Jordan Brooks, their free agent linebacker. Like, Ramsey's not even the player that he used to be there in terms of his athleticism, and they're still getting such good play out of him. So like, I've been very impressed with what Weaver has done. He's coming from the Mike McDonald system, but also like, he was in Baltimore for years as the assistant head coach to John Harbaugh, which is, I think, a great spot to be learning under. He's been a defensive line coach in the league for like over a decade. He's got a ton of NFL experience in a ton of different spots. So I don't think it's like, oh, a Mike McDonald, copy paste retread. Like that's not what Weaver's doing. He's doing a lot of the McDonald stuff, but that's not what he's capable of doing. That's not necessarily what he brings. The fact that he's only been a coordinator for 1 year means you're like, all right, like, are we over-indexing on just this 1 year of Dolphins defensive success? Are we hiring him for the system? You kind of want to be careful about hiring those guys with limited coordinator experience. But at the same time, the book on Weaver has always been how he relates to the players, has always been what he's done for the rooms that he's been in, this defensive line coach spots and all these different teams that he's been to, what he was like in that Baltimore locker room. Like, this is the guy who, even of that entire group, like Denard Wilson, Zach Orr, Anthony Weaver was the one you heard about as like, having the biggest shoulders in the room in terms of like the problems that he would take on and the way that the young guys would look up to him and the way that he would kind of lead. And again, having that assistant head coach title, he seems like he's got a good culture guy thing to him. And so when I'm trying to figure out who I want to talk to, even if it's just to be like a year ahead on a guy, Anthony Weaver is one of the names that comes up for me.
Ruiz?
I almost had Liam Coen on my list.
Yes, but I kind of do. He was replaced by Kirby Smart because I was so mad at you. But yeah, we can talk about him for a second.
Because I think you could say everything you just said about Anthony Weaver, about Liam Coen, with what he's done for that Bucs offense. I don't think I've ever seen a coordinator, a play caller, understand Baker Mayfield's game as much as Liam Coen has. And he's fixed the Bucs run game, which has been an issue even when Tom Brady was there, when Bruce Arians was coaching that team. I've talked to him. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's a sharp guy. I think he understands how modern football works. I think he was there under Sean McVay when they won the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford, and he was part of the offensive staff that put together that drop back passing game for Matthew Stafford, which was a big deal. To be able to kind of craft that drop back passing game in one offseason when you get Matthew Stafford, I thought was a big deal. And he's a big part of it. And like when he explained the thinking behind that, it helps because me and Ben and guys like us like had this take on Jared Goff before, but he like confirmed all my priors on like what I thought about the Rams. So that probably endeared him to me. But my concern is 1 year of experience as an offensive coordinator. I guess it's 2 years because he had the Rams year. But he wasn't calling plays. But this is his first year as a play caller in the NFL. He's doing well. I just want to see it for 2 more years before I put him on my list.
Yeah, he's kind of on my list. I mean, the college experience I think is really important. The fact that he's doing so well with Baker, and that was a big job to take. Like Dave Canales authored the best quarterback turnaround in last year, and like you have to keep that going. And in many ways, it's gotten better this year. So I like Liam Coen. He's really, really well respected. I wouldn't be surprised. Some of these guys get jobs a year early because an owner just falls in love with them. And
Canales.
The way we fired, but I mean Canales was different because Carolina. It was tough to attract candidates.
It's enough said. Just say Carolina because Carolina and
keep pounding.
They do. I think they're going to be good. I think they're building something. Am I crazy?
Yeah.
Well, that's the only thing they can be doing is building. Maybe we're building something.
All right. I'm going to throw out. I already did Kirby. I'll do my number 3 quickly, and then you guys can do your number 3. Mine's Joe Brady, who, like Steven, you mentioned it's like, oh, the stats are the same, but the vibes are different. The vibes are important, and I talked to Joe in July, and I just got a sense of a calm, confident guy who doesn't really, and I know this sounds crazy, but like the thing he said, and I've said it before, is like, I said, what's the number one thing you're thinking about with this offense? He was like, we just want to be able to win in any way, because there were so many games last year where it was like, oh, we're just going to run with James Cook 35 times. We're just going to do that. We're not going to throw, or like I kind of just feel like they're a game plan offense where they're just like, what is it going to take to win this game on Sunday? And not, we're going to run our offense or whatever. Like, he's adaptable. We saw what he did with LSU. He's young. He connects with the players. He is what Steven Ruiz thinks Dan Lanning is. I feel like there's something here with Joe.
That's Brady. A take. That's a bold take right there. But no, I'm a Brady guy. Don't let what I said about the Bills offense, their stats, like fool you. I think Brady has done a good job with this team. I thought he did a good job in Carolina and was a scapegoat for Matt Rule, who said he didn't run the ball enough, which was insane to me. But no, this year, I agree. I just wrote an article stacking the AFC contenders, and my point about Buffalo's offense, despite the similar production, is that they have more ways to beat you. Like you just said, they have an under center run game now. They have a play action game. They have an RPO game. They have a screen game. Like, they do have more ways to beat you, which I think is a testament to how he thinks about the sport. And if you go back to Carolina, I thought he made Sam Darnold look passable before Kevin O'Connell ever did.
One thing, Joe Brady grew up a massive Miami Hurricanes fan, massive. and I'm sure it is psychologically torturing him that he replaced Ken Dorsey and is doing a better job. That must be so weird. Because
I think he's probably okay with it.
I think it'd be weird. Like, who's your hero? No. Who was your hero growing up, Ben?
Kevin Clark.
Yes. So if you took over the Ringer NFL show and did a better job,
it felt fine.
Like, what the f? We have to bleep that out. We have to bleep out you saying it felt fine.
I know we were bleeping.
We're cutting this entire episode.
Are we even recording right now?
We're not recording. Okay. We're not recording. After Adam Schefter said he had sex while breaking Dale Carter's suspension,
the pod peaked.
We actually canceled the show.
Yeah.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words. Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. So, does anybody have Jesse Minter?
No. Minter is like first on my list of like, I would interview this guy to pick his brain and like see what's what and like, all right.
Steal his concepts.
Yeah, and if he blows me out of the water, sure. Minter's the one like, when you don't see a guy coming at all, it's either like really good news for him or it's maybe it's bad news. And Minter's the guy who coming into the season, I was like, all right, maybe it will be cool. And now it's like, he's doing what Staley always wanted to do, and he's doing it with the Chargers, which is so funny. So
that was literally what I was driving the car
Dorsey
to
Brady
that destination.
Thing.
Yeah. Except nobody respects Staley. That was what I was gonna say. That's my only note on Jesse Minter. Is that Jesse Minter is what Brandon Staley said he was.
Yeah.
And I will never get over football media. And I fell for this a little bit, but not like other people, where it's like, Brandon Staley says he can stop the run without devoting people to it. Yeah. Oh, really? Do you have Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey? Is that helping? Is that helping? Or is it your schemes? Him taking credit for Aaron Donald's existence is one of the craziest things. It was a literal mass hysteria in football media.
That's his version of the Dan Lanning Wisconsin jump around video. It's just good marketing. All right, and that's how you get the wheels turning in the media.
All right, I gotta go in 2 minutes. Steven Ruiz, you're number 3.
Brian Flores. Come on, let's get this guy back in the league. I don't care about Tua Tagovailoa's feelings getting hurt. By the way, he was on the right side of history there. So and everyone else in the Dolphins locker room besides Kenny Stills. And Minka Fitzpatrick. So 3 guys seem to vouch for Flo. And everyone in Minnesota loves him. Everyone in Pittsburgh loves him. I think Mike Tomlin he should be inducted into the Hall of Fame for bringing Brian Flores back into the league, because there was a chance that Brian Flores would have never been back in the league after the lawsuit against the NFL. But Tomlin was like, no, this guy has to coach in professional football. And now the Vikings are getting the benefits.
Minka doesn't like Flores? Was he on the market? I missed that.
No, they traded him.
Oh,
that's why they
traded him. Oh yeah.
No, there was a big.
They ended up together on the Steelers again too.
Yeah, Minka wanted. I can't remember what Minka wanted to play X position, and Flores wanted to play Y, and then they never agreed.
Oh well. Yeah. Ben Solak, number 3.
So Flores was my third name. I think that he was such a hot name in September, and now he's fallen away. And I think that's so silly. He should be the man. But in that Steven brought up his name. What I will say is, I like. If Brian Daboll or Kevin Stefanski gets fired, those would be the 2 head coaches that I would be interested in potentially looking at retreading it. Now, I do think that...
Why would they fire Stefanski?
They're 2-8.
Okay. They traded for a $230 million.
We're talking about the Browns right now, Kevin? Did you just ask me why would the Browns do X? The Browns?
Didn't they just sign him to a contract extension?
Oh, yeah, that... Oh no! NFL has never fired anybody.
$30 million to go away and then coach the Giants next year. He would be the top coach on the market.
Wait, the Browns aren't smart with their money. What makes you think that?
Kevin Stefanski got asked about being on the hot seat this week. This is I'm not making this up. Do I think he's going to get fired? No, but Brian Flores was my 3rd, and Steven took him, and so now I have to come up with different names. And what I'm saying is, if Brian Daboll or Kevin Stefanski were fired, those would be the 2 head coaches I would be interested in retreading. I do think it is.
Can I? I'm going to say something. I think they should just swap teams. I think Daboll should be the coach of the Browns, and Stefanski should be the coach of the Giants.
Not a bad idea.
Stefanski would be awesome with the coach of the Giants. He's good with the media. He is from the area. His dad is a Philly guy, which Ben Solak claims to be, even though he's from rural Pennsylvania. Did I ever tell you the time where I was at Eagles practice and they got in the Eagles media got in a huge fight over whether or not Kobe was a Philly guy?
Yes. Was that the same week that you big time at Philly practice, or was that different?
In Anaheim. You didn't have a travel budget back then.
Yeah, that's facts.
It was in Anaheim. This was Carson Wentz. This is the week before Carson Wentz got injured. This is what they were doing the week before Carson Wentz got injured at the Coliseum. Media was arguing over whether or not Kobe Bryant was a Philly guy.
People in media don't argue about sports anymore.
The liberals don't like it when they do that, Steve.
All right, I love you guys. You guys are two of my favorite people in media. I'm so glad we got to do this again. It was electric. Ben Solak, read him at ESPN.com. Watch him on ESPN Bet. Watch him on SportsCenter. He's all over the place. Stephen Ruiz, quarterback rankings and backup at ringer.com. Thanks, boys.